cup of tea?
Okay, yeah, just give me a minute. I'm just making some notes on how to take better notes for the vlog. Oh yeah, as well, remind me after tea to go up into the loft and get that really cool notebook down. You know, the one's got all my sort of, I guess my life's learnings in it. Well, it's a bit of a mess up here. I think this is certainly a task that I need to work on. But what I've been up here looking for is actually this notebook. It's a notebook that my friend and colleague gave me a couple of years back, and it actually contains pretty much all of my management notes and ideas and thinking around sort of growing in your career. And I also stumbled across a box full of old notebooks, and in today's vlog what we're actually going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about note-taking and taking it to an extra level. When I started taking better notes, not only did I feel calmer, more in control, obviously remembering more stuff, but I also felt more decluttered up here. I started to excel in my career. I started to be taken seriously. I started to feel, for the first time, like I was actually in control of my own personal development. In this video, I'm going to share with you my own sort of note-taking process, how I go about doing it, what tools I use, and why I do it. But first off, let's get that big question out of the way. Should we be taking notes using digital devices or using analog devices such as a pen and paper? So I personally recommend that you use a pen and paper to take notes. I'm going to give you some reasons why in a minute, but bear with me, I'm not a complete Luddite. In fact, the technology, the digital tools, they play a really important part in this process. We'll come to that in a minute. But here's some really compelling reasons why I believe that a pen and paper is the best note-taking method. So when we take notes using analog devices, a pen and paper for example, we are not necessarily writing things to remember them in the future, we're writing things to remember them now. There's a growing body of research that suggests that when we use a pen and paper to make notes, we are actually learning up to 3 to 5 times more than if we just used a digital tool or read things out aloud. Now I see this firsthand. When my boys are learning their spellings for school and they don't write them out, their scores dip. When they're just reading them and trying to remember, their scores go down. When they write them out over and over again, they learn deeply, their scores go up. With so much information flying around, it really pays to write it down so we can remember it now and get it out of our heads. When we use a digital tool to make notes, we're able to transcribe at a pace that we simply can't do with a pen and paper. Now this might sound like a very efficient way of taking notes, and no doubt it probably is, but my view is that it's not very effective, and you know how I feel about making ineffective things more efficient. It just doesn't make sense. The goal of note-taking is to be effective, and part of that effectiveness, that learning process, is taking that information, interpreting it, and then digesting it, and turning it into your own words. And that is why writing with a pen and paper is so much more powerful. It's really rude to be bashing away on a keyboard. What it shows is that you're not listening to the other person, you're too busy typing. That other person has no idea whether or not you're making notes or whether you're on Twitter or Facebook. So it's a really, really good visual clue to the other person. It shows them that you're listening, that you're engaged. Listening is the greatest compliment we can give somebody. So ditch those electronics, close that lid, and focus on paying attention. And when we do that, we'll find our notes are better and we'll come across as much more professional. Another reason to ditch those electronics is it's very easy to get distracted. I see this all the time in the corporate world. People on email. Now they may have intentionally gone into the meeting and decided that they were going to spend that time doing email. That's ridiculous. That is a behavior that I would suggest you don't do. But sometimes it's because they're taking notes. And if they haven't closed down the applications or the notifications, which frankly most people don't do, then they're going to get those toasts popping up. And those toasts with those pop-ups, they're going to distract you. Next thing you know, you're doing email rather than contributing to a meeting. Another good reason to ditch those electronics is because they're really, really annoying. If you've ever been in a meeting or at a conference, it's even worse at a conference. There's somebody sat behind you bashing away on a keyboard, making notes. It's really, really annoying. And it's super annoying when everybody in the meeting room is bashing away writing notes. There's something really calming about people putting away electronics, focusing on who they're talking to, and making notes by hand, quietly, calmly. So hold on, I'm not a Luddite. I'm going to use technology for what it's particularly very good at, and that's for storage and it's for searchability. They are supremely good being able to find things, to record things, to hold the data that we want it to keep. I have 3 particular systems that I tend to use. First one for personnel data. This is one-to-ones, coaching moments. These are the observations of your members of staff. These are the notes you're making about potential promotions and all the other stuff that comes with being a good manager. These notes should preferably belong in the HR system of choice. And I hear you say, well, hang on a minute, HR system of choice? The chances are you probably don't have one of these tools. Most companies don't. But think about this. Would you, as an employee, want all of your notes about performance and discussions and coaching meetings stored in somebody's personal Evernote account? No. So it needs to be stored in a sanctioned, approved, secure system. And if you don't have one, be the kind of person that sticks your hand up and raises this as important. This is data protection. We should take our members of staff's data incredibly seriously, just like we do with our customers. So for tasks and actions, these end up in my to-do system. My to-do system of choice is a wonderful electronic tool called Todoist. Super easy, super simple. I can add a task, assign a date, stick it in a project, tag it, do all sorts of cool stuff with it. So actions end up in that tool. Everything else, book notes, conference notes, ideas, blog thoughts, future business ideas, you name it, anything else, pretty much ends up in Evernote. I've already done a video about personal knowledge management system, so I'm not going to talk too much about indexing and finding all of these things, but I will say that that previous video was based on me using Apple Notes. Then one day I woke up to find that Apple Notes had deleted everything. It was devastating, actually, to be honest, and so since then I've never touched Apple Notes. I plan on going back and redoing those sections of that video because I've now moved back to Evernote. Evernote seems to just be a little bit more secure and a little bit more reliable. So I won't go into detail too much about how I do that. I've covered that in the personal knowledge management system video. So what do we actually want to capture notes about? Of course, there's records of meetings, conversations, behaviors that you've observed, there's tasks, to-dos, there's new processes, technology, things you want to research, there's learning, there's ideas, there's blog posts, there's a whole load of stuff. So instead of me just going on and rattling through each one of those sections, I actually thought it'd be really interesting to show you the sort of notebook capturing process that I have. It's split really into 2 main rules. Rule number 1 is that I have a separate container for each part of this sort of note-taking world. And the second thing is that I'm never really bound to any single way of capturing notes, any sort of methodology or approach. But instead what I do is I have this sort of key, this sort of labeling description, this way of identifying quickly what each note is. So in this book here, this is actually a moleskin. This is where I do my journaling. So when I sit down and I open the moleskin, I know it's time to journal. This is the notebook I use for film ideas, shot locations, actually breaking down the videos that I create. Really like this book, really useful, pops into a camera bag and I can take this out and about with me. So I use these little notebooks. These were from TK Maxx, I think is a shop here in the UK. They're really not actually very good. I will say that if you fold them too far, the pages all fall out. The quality's pretty poor, but they're the perfect size. They fit in your pocket. I can take these out and about, and when I go out cycling, for example, or going out for a walk, I'll carry one of these just to get my ideas in there. These are great for obviously if you're on the train and you're commuting or you're just out and about. So I'm a big fan of yellow legal pads. Now I use the yellow legal pads to sort of break out big ideas. It's a big page, it's an A4 sheet. And what I do within here is this is sort of mind mapping, it's about brain dumping, it's about sort of going through the process of taking apart maybe a new talk that I want to create, creating that outline of it. I also use the yellow legal pads for writing all of my books. So I tend to write the chapters out by longhand. There's a really good reason for this. Obviously it's quicker to type it, of course, but when you're typing and you're editing and you're reformatting everything, you don't ever see the sort of logic that went into the change. Whereas here what I can do is I can write a chapter and there could be a sentence that I'm just not comfortable with, so I scribble it out and I rewrite bits around it. I can see that when I come to type this up, and I can look at the thought patterns that went in. Why did I scribble that out? Where's the notes? Where's the edits? You lose all of that with the digital, unless obviously you're going to track all the changes in there. This just is one of those formats. I just really like breaking out ideas into a big format like this, and there's something just really cool about the yellow legal paper. Just geeking out. For specific projects, I might actually dedicate an entire notebook. Now these are from IKEA, so IKEA do really actually quite good notebooks. They're fairly cheap, but the paper's really easy for the pen to go through. I don't know how it bleeds. It bleeds through the paper hugely. This particular video, all of the ideas and everything for the video was actually in this book. So for my weekly planning, I use a Inamio diary. It's sort of like a weekly planner. What it allows me to do is just see my week at a glance, and what I'll do is I'll take my most important tasks out of Todoist and I'll write them down the side so that I know that this week this is maybe the 5, 6, maybe 10 most important tasks I need to do. I can schedule my week, and again, when I know that I'm going to get the planner out, I know it's time to plan. There's a sort of comfort in knowing that a certain book solves a certain problem. This is a cool little planner available from Amazon. There's links to all of this stuff in the video show notes below. So finally, moving on to the notebook. This is my sort of learning journal notebook. This was a gift. This is a Ted Baker notebook. This was a sort of, I guess, a point in my career where I took everything out of the digital tools and put it in paper so I could carry it around. It was when I became a consultant, actually. And yes, I could go into Evernote and find these things, no problem at all. But what I wanted to do was to create essentially a learning book, and part of this again is a sort of legacy, so the boys might pick this up one day, and this essentially contains everything that I talk about here, everything that I'm writing into my new book called Meditations on Management, and essentially this is a learning book. This is my entire career condensed into a book, and there's all sorts of cool stuff in here, but essentially this is my learning book. Now this was up in the loft, and the reason I put it up in the loft is because I'm writing books, and when I'm writing stuff I'm not reading that much because I find that it actually tends to influence my writing more than I probably want it to. So when I'm writing I don't do much research, so I put this away. It's all been digitized anyway, so I can find it if I really want to. But once I finish writing these next couple of books and finishing some of these videos during lockdown, this is coming out. I'm gonna read all those books that are on my shelf that I've never got around to reading yet. So as you can see, a huge amount of books, and they all serve a different purpose. Now there is an overhead to this in that I've got all of these different books. Now this overhead, I'm happy to live with the overhead of having these extra notebooks that serve all these different purposes, because as I said, there's a comfort that comes from taking out a notebook and knowing that when that notebook comes out, I'm doing this sort of work. So I'm very quickly going to rattle through some of the ideas in which I use to take notes. I'm not wedded to any particular one of these, but as I mentioned earlier, there is a key, there is a labeling process that I apply to every single type of note. For anything that's an action, I write a capital A and I draw a circle around it, so that when I'm looking through my notes, I know that that is an action. Now I tend to process all of my notes every week, like usually on a Friday afternoon I'll schedule some time for it. But actually with actions, I tend to review them every day because of course some things are probably more immediate than others. Anything that's an idea, I put an I, a capital I with a circle around it so that I know that this is an idea. Process it as you see fit. For me, ends up in an Evernote folder. For new blog ideas, new topics, things I'm going to write, I put a B and again put a circle around it, a capital B with a circle around it. As a manager, when I'm working in a team, I want to be giving people feedback. Positive feedback by far and away should outweigh negative feedback, but of course there's always a need to give negative feedback, and it's always about behaviors. So what I do is I observe the behavior, not the person, but the behavior that that person is exhibiting, and I make a note of it, and this gets stored in a notebook and obviously then into the personnel system of choice from your HR team or your IT company or whatever it is that you're doing. And with that, I put an F+ for positive feedback and an F- for negative feedback. Now, this is really important that you keep and you store these notes. Think about the fact that you're trying to get somebody promoted and the executive team or the HR team are looking for evidence. Well, there it is. These are the feedback you've been given. These are the performance notes. But again, equally, should you ever have to remove somebody from an organization, then you're going to need the evidence that the HR team need in order to move ahead with the process. But keep this data safe. Think about it. Would you want anyone else in your organization seeing your performance notes? Of course not. So protect this, guard it, treat it with integrity. It's very, very important. A general note-taking idea that I have is to make everything 60 days proof. So what that means that in 60 days from now, when you've lost the context, it will still make sense. Trust me, I see people all the time looking at reports, looking at emails, looking at scrap notes, and they have no idea what it's actually about. And this is why 60-day proof is such an important concept. So you want to be adding dates, times, people you were with, maybe some emotions in there. After all, we tie memory to emotions so that in 60 days time, it will make sense. So moving on very quickly to some different styles of note-taking. One of my favorites is mind maps, sometimes referred to as a spider diagram. It essentially has a central core topic and then all sorts of relevant pieces of information coming from it. Mind maps are a very powerful way of showing relationships between pieces of information. However, what I see often is people using mind maps and then trying to communicate to others with them. It's a mind map. It's your mind, it's a map of it on paper. There's no guarantee that the person you're speaking to, that you're trying to communicate with, will see that map in the same way that you do. But what I would suggest you do is you use mind maps for capturing notes and data, information, whatever it is that you're capturing, and then you work out whether that medium, whether that communication is going to hit your purpose, your audience, and your context. And 9 times out of 10, I guarantee you're going to have to do the hard work of turning that mind map into something that's more relevant. The Cornell method is a great method. I tend to use this when I'm learning a particular subject. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to draw a line about 2/3 of the way across the page. You're going to draw it down. You're going to draw a vertical line running from the top to the bottom, splitting the page into 2 with a bigger section, about 2/3, and a smaller section, maybe on the right or the left, it's up to you, for notes. And essentially what you can do is you're going to capture the main notes, the main topic, the main ideas in the main big section of the page. But those things that pop up, like, ideas for further research, questions to ask, maybe it's some actions, maybe it's some extra thoughts. What it does is it leaves space for those in the small section on the side, on the right or the left, whichever way you've drawn this. I really like this sort of idea of a flow diagram. It's not really a flow in the sense of that it's showing the flow of data or information through a system, for example, but it just makes note-taking slightly more interesting. I can create notes that flow, and they do probably logically flow on from each other, but that's not the point. It's just more fun. It's easier to read, and I just find it slightly more engaging to look at in the future. Of course, there's bullet points. We can just do bullet pointed lists. I mean, that's great. Bullet points work really well when the data itself isn't in much depth. It may be sort of high-level categories, high-level decisions, high-level actions, for example. Bullet points are a really effective way of doing it. And of course, there's just general notes, which is basically just a load of notes on a page, which is actually what probably 60 to 70% of my notes are. It sort of comes into its own when you start applying a legend or a key, like we've talked about, like the A for action, the I for idea, for example. Then you can quickly scan those notes and find those things. Now, I cover a huge amount more about how I then process that data and become smarter with it in the personal knowledge management system video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you're going to pick up that notepad, you're going to pick up that pen. I hope I've given you some compelling reasons to ditch the digital tools and focus on the analog ones, but I also hope that you're going to build a knowledge management system using those digital tools, because they are very powerful at doing that as well. So with that, I hope you're going to close that laptop, grab that notepad, go forth and listen, make really good notes, put them to use in a personal knowledge management system, and then find the style that resonates with you. So I hope this has been useful and insightful. If you've liked this video, then please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel so you're never going to miss one of these wondrous videos. And of course, I'm very much looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Where's my pen? I've lost my pen. Quiet in the studio, please.